Welcome, everybody, to the Troubadour Show. Today, I have Mike White, and we're going to be talking about finances, happiness, and did you follow your rich dad or your poor dad? And some of you may notice that reference, but we'll talk a little bit about that. Before I say anything, I just want to mention Mike White has a website or a podcast, YouTube show. So go check them out. You can go to, I'll put this in the show notes, linktree.ee/the Mike White pod. So make sure you check that stuff out. We'll be talking about his podcast, a podcast focused on documenting my learning through life, which I like that a lot. That's cool. And I know you're also, are you a recent Austin person who just moved here recently, or have you been here?
I just moved back. I went to undergrad here. So I
Oh,
left in
okay.
2017 and I've been here for about the last year and a half. So glad to
Oh,
be back with a bunch of objectivists and freedom loving people.
there are some, but there's also the opposite, quite a lot of the opposite in the broader Austin community.
This is true.
So
Yeah.
it's nice to have our little microcosm of objectivists in Austin, but it's definitely a blue city for sure.
Mhm. No, definitely.
What brought you back, by the way?
Yeah. So I I didn't really know what I wanted to do after the Navy. And so I was a submarine officer, did five
Okay.
years in the Navy, and I had the GI Bill. So they'll pay for my schooling if I wanted to. And I was trying to think of like, okay, where do I want to go? What am I interested in? And really, Austin was really, I think, the best city, big time objectivist scene, just some awesome objectivist intellectuals at the University of Texas
Yeah.
that I could go to and learn from. They have the Ayn Rand Club. If you guys have, if you're UT students at all, definitely check them out. But also just the Bitcoin scene too. So I started learning about Bitcoin, uh,
Okay.
separate to the whole thing. But Austin is the Bitcoin capital, so objectivism and Bitcoin. I thought this was the perfect place to go do an MBA. Maybe eventually I want to be running a business at some point, and getting that general business knowledge would be beneficial on the Navy's dime.
Nice. I like that. So, okay. So, yeah, I see that you have your Bitcoin shirt in the background. I know you do a lot of podcasts on Bitcoin. And I think that'll lead to our broader conversation about finance and happiness. But that's interesting. So you came to Austin for the opportunity, and I did not know, I guess, that it was the epicenter of Bitcoin. I knew it was popular here, but I did not realize that. And I think it's great that we have, so you mentioned the Ayn Rand club on campus. So if you're like under 25, I think even if you're not on a UT student, you should probably still hop on over and you can find them on Meetup. There's the
Yeah,
Salem Center that Dr. Greg Salmieri is one of the he's not the owner or whatever, but is one of the people there. And they do a lot of cool events. I think they're having Euron Brook pretty soon come to Austin. Then I run a social group called Objectivist Social, which is just, again, socials. We'd kind of hang out, meet with all the different people in the area. So there is a lot going on in terms of objectivism here in Austin. I would say that it's more the epicenter than Southern California used to be, which is where I think the epicenter used to be. And so that's an exciting part of living here for me.
yeah. Unfortunately, we don't have the weather of Southern California, but
Yeah, that's a big deal.
you got the trade-offs.
Yeah, I always talk about the weather, and so I won't go into it too much this time. But I think it's an important segue for happiness, though, because we're talking about finances, happiness. How do you achieve that? How do you think about that? I could say my reason for moving to Austin was because I was in Northern California, which I think has some of the best weather in the world. That's where I was born and raised. I loved it. So I always kind of find myself gravitating back there at some points in my life. But because of the lockdowns during COVID, because of the intensity of all that, I became so isolated, so depressed, so miserable that the weather just wasn't helping at all. I used to have a motorcycle then because I could I could literally ride year round anywhere. And I basically had that as my main vehicle. And I loved that. It was a lot of fun. I can't really do that here. Like there's times when it's just too hot for me, especially to do that. So
Mhm.
when I was thinking about happiness, the next stages of my life, what would I do? I was like 36, 35 or something, and I'm 38 now. So I was just looking at places, and even though I don't like Texas, I just like, less, standard of living is, or, the cost of living is lower. the weather sucks, but there's a lot of good objectivists. I was like, all right, fine. So I did it, and it was a good thing because like it made sense on other levels, and I just had to reprioritize my values, and that I think has led to more happiness for me.
Yeah, I think you touched on a great point there. You could have all the motorcycles in the world, the best motorcycle, the best workshop, all this stuff that money can buy and you can get with money. But if you don't have that freedom, if you don't have the other stuff in life, it's not going to bring you happiness. So it's I think some people, people say, "Oh, I just need a little bit more money and I'll be happier." I think that's not true at all.
I will say one good thing about the shutdowns for me, and I hated them probably as much or more than anybody, but was having that bike in California. So you can lane split in California. Like
Yeah.
that's like one of the few, that means like driving in between the lanes, right? In which I did all the time because there was so much traffic. But it was crazy because during the lockdowns, there's like no traffic. So the one perk is that I could ride my motorcycle anywhere and just go. Now the sad part is like I couldn't go anywhere. There's nowhere to go. So like
Yeah.
I could just go, like I could enjoy the ride. And then, I could be I'd be on the beach. That was beautiful. That was wonderful. There's no one around. It was like, so you kind of get an appreciation for the people side of things, which is important in life too. I mean, there's only so much I can handle the isolation personally.
No, definitely. We had some guys on my boat that really wanted to go bowling during the lockdown, and
Yeah.
they got caught off base at a bowling alley and
Ooh.
ended up getting reduced in rank and pay and going to captain's
Wow.
mast. So a huge deal just for going to a bowling alley. So it got insane out there.
Now, I know you and I have one connection to finances. So I don't want to. I'd be interested if you're interested in telling me a little bit about Bitcoin. I've heard some of it. I don't know a lot about it. Doesn't honestly make 100% sense to me in terms of an investment, but I can see it as like an interesting thing. But you and I do have a financial connection, which is with Rich Dad Poor Dad. So I read Robert Kiyosaki's book, I think in like 2001, because I was still in high school. I graduated 2003. And I actually started a little real estate investment club in high school. And the club was actually just to learn about this stuff together, to bring on real estate investors and other types of salespeople to learn those skills back in high school, and eventually, build out the kind of worldview or the kind of plan that Robert Kiyosaki was talking about. We played Cashflow. I think this is when
Yep.
Cashflow was coming out, the game Cashflow 101. I think there was like a 202 or a 303. There's a more advanced game. And it was like a $200. So it was like a big deal, I think, to buy those back then, the more advanced one. So we did that. And I learned a lot from that, even though I ended up not pursuing that real estate investment. Although another person in my club did, and I could talk about him and what he's doing very well, I think, because he did pursue that. But I would be curious about your Robert Kiyosaki, Rich Dad, Poor Dad story.
Yeah, so I learned of it as a kid. My dad was a big reader. That's how I learned Ayn Rand. But he also had Rich Dad Poor Dad, and he said, "You got to read this book. You got to read this book." And eventually, I picked it up. Against it wasn't super interested in it, but then it started making a ton of sense to me, and just the thought of your time being one of the best, most like the ultimate asset is your time, and
Mhm.
the difference between assets and liabilities, and
Yeah.
how you can set yourself up to where you're not having to work at for a salary job that you may not love, that allows you to do other things you love for the rest of your life. Like I I think jobs are great and uh, necessary for most people, but eventually not everyone can work in their with what they're passionate about. I mean, ideally that would be the case. I find it very hard. Maybe I'm wrong there, but I think that financial freedom allows you to do stuff with your life that you really love, spend time with the people you love, and work on projects that you love without having to worry about where's my next paycheck coming from. And so that whole concept of assets versus liabilities, I mean, he's Robert Kiyosaki's big into real estate, but Rich Dad Poor Dad isn't just about real estate. It's about
Mhm.
owning businesses as well, owning assets that cash flow and using that cash flow to pay for your liabilities. And I love that idea uh, to never get myself in a pinch. If I always have cash flowing assets, I know that that is financial freedom to me.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that was I think the big takeaway for me as well was like as I was developing these ideas as a high school kid, developing a kind of different perspective on how to achieve success, particularly material success. And then I was also simultaneously reading Ayn Rand, which is about material plus spiritual success in conjunction. So thinking about those two together was very useful for me. And I agree with you that there's an important thing that we aren't really taught in terms of a mentality of how to think independently to build our own, lives the way we want to build our lives, to kind of be the CEO of your own life in the sense of like I'm not, and I don't think you are opposed to a job, but thinking about it in the way that it has always been taught to us is that get good grades, you go to a good school, you get a good job, and you're taken care of in a sense. Like that's the message I got. I think most of us got in America. And, that can work out to some degree, but there's a lot of evidence that doesn't work out. Like you could start making a lot of money and then your whole industry is taken over by AI. And now what do you do? Because you didn't have any control and you didn't think about the control you could have over your life. And that kind of thing I think is detrimental because again, you're giving up the control. Like when I think about going to an employer, which I have an employer now and I love my job, it's a great job. But when I think about going to an employer as a paid employee, to me, it's actually more like an alliance. It's more like we're having an agreement. I don't really consider it like I consider them as like my biggest client in a way, where they're a client. Now we have parameters, we have a contract, this is how it works. But I don't think of it as like they own my life. They don't even own my life during the 9 to 5 or any period of time. It's just like I'm doing this X job for you to get X or to get Y result, and that's it. And like, can I get Y result better? And you evaluate me on that. And that's how I look at it. And I think they look at me the same way. And there's a kind of reciprocal relationship rather than, oh, give me this job so I can have the salary and I'll do whatever you want and anything you say. And it's like,
Hmm.
no, you're hiring me for my mind and my talents, essentially,
Yeah,
which
but
is a different mentality, right? I think.
yeah, and it's good to have that mentality, and some people, I wouldn't say aren't able, I don't know if that's the right word, but if they get themselves in such a pinch where they have to have a job just to pay the bills, just to eat. And I think this reminds me of the Fountainhead and Howard Rourke, how
Yeah.
he goes bankrupt and he has to take a job at a rock quarry, which for him, it's I bet it's rewarding in that these are the materials that build the buildings that he loves to design, but he'd much rather be an architect than working at that rock quarry for however long he did. And if he had financial assets or stuff that could pay for his sustenance, he wouldn't have to go to that rock quarry. He could keep designing
Mm.
buildings, and that's that's how I think of the power of assets and financial freedom. It gives you the options to really choose the jobs you love and the projects you love because you know that your basic needs are taken care of, and it's on your own dime and own risk. It's not a UBI or anything. It's not like we need some socialized safety net. It's you make your own safety net.
Well, so here's where I'm going to push back a little bit on that idea, actually, because I agree in some sense, but one of the problems. So this is why I left the path of Rich Dad Poor Dad, which does push you toward getting assets for the sake of getting assets. But the problem, so I agree with that, and I looking back, maybe I should have done more of that for sure, because I think financially I'd be in a much better position. I'm not in a horrible position, but I'd be in a better position. But one of the things I think is problematic in that versus the Howard Rourke model, in a sense, is that you aren't necessarily building the skills in the profession that you want. So let's say Howard Rourke became like a real estate agent or like,
Mm.
went into the investment world or something like that. Well, then he's not practicing design, right? He's not, I mean, now he could on the side. Yeah, you could do that. And that's fine. And again, sometimes you have to do that. I'm not against that. My point is just that, especially when you're young and you can make those non-financial decisions more easily. I do think it's actually valuable to just go through the suffering, quote unquote, financially when you're young for your craft, because in the long run, it'll benefit you. Now, how long you do that, how much you do that, that's up to every individual person. And if you're capable of on the side running like a drop shipping business that makes money, do it 100%. If you get a chunk of windfall money from inheritance, invest it in real estate and continue suffering financially for a while. And if you want to be a writer, whatever it is you want to do, you need to just do that full time, particularly when you're young. Otherwise, you'll never get great at it.
Yeah, no, that's true. The opportunity cost, right? Like all the time spent reading real estate books, I could have been reading something else that could perfect my craft in. So I
But
think
it depends on your passions and interests, though, Mike. So
exactly.
you might be interested in that legitimately. So my friend, his name's Marco Romero. We've done business together. He's here in the Central Texas area. He comes to a lot of events. So hopefully you'll meet him sometime. But he stayed with it, and now he has like, I don't know, 40. They call it doors. He has like 40 doors now, right? And he has like all these investment properties, and he loves that stuff. But that's why he stayed with it, is because he loved that, right? I
Yeah.
left because I loved writing and literature, and I wanted to pursue that. So go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, and it makes me think about it. What more one of another big reason that I like the idea of real estate and started investing in real estate, it was kind of a it was almost out of fear. And I don't know if this was rational or not, but I saw what the financial crisis could do. So my dad got a little rich dad happy and had over leveraged himself with some
Mm,
houses, and he was leaving the military, and the financial crisis happened. He had to sell and just got himself into a lot of trouble with uh, real estate and finances. And I saw when you have to, like, all the choices he made, which I know I lived a great childhood, but I saw what he had to do to provide for us. I didn't want that
mhm,
with my family in the future, and I wanted to be in a really stable footing that didn't add all those stressors, whether rational or not. You know, we all it's his character. There's nothing happened with his character. He's a great man. I love him, but there was definitely a lot of stress in the
mhm.
household when you're going through financial problems. Um,
Yeah,
so that made me really want to, no matter what, always have that safety net, which
yeah.
I don't know. There's trade offs there.
Well, so I think one of Robert Kiyosaki's big values and insights is his whole conversation with his dad, who was an educator, and other teachers in the school system, who, when he asked them, when are we going to start learning about money, they said, we don't teach that subject here. And so the idea of how to deal with finances, how to think about finances, how to be smart about your finances is like an important subject that we aren't actually taught much about. And it's valuable for us to learn some of the basics. Like I was probably in my 30s when I started learning things about it. And that was only mostly because I started, one of my clients was a guy named Jake Nuno, who's a certified financial planner in San Antonio. And for 7 years, we've done a podcast called The Jake of All Trades, which is a financial podcast. And I would basically be, he was the expert, I was the dummy who didn't know anything. And he would just basically, I literally started off in an RV when we were doing this broke, basically. And then I learned a lot. Now I have a house, I built my own gym. A lot of that's just making like slight different changes in how I think about things. I still think I have a lot to learn, but the value of understanding finances is profound. And I think if we learn them younger, people can make more decisions, and having like a holistic view of life is really difficult because, again, my advice to like 19, 18, 19, 20, all the way up to like 26, 27 year olds is just live in poverty, and in a sense, like be willing to go after your passion that you really want. And if you need to, like that's a time when you can do the poverty thing a lot better, and just do that for 5, 6 years, going toward the thing you want, and put anything you can aside into any kind of investment, like to get started, even a small amount, even if it's just a couple $1,000s, whatever, to get started. And that's it. And just focus on getting something and thinking about, how am I going to take my passion and make real money with it, which I think is the valuable, endeavor. I Going after your passion for the sake of going after your passion, I think, is a mistake. You should be figuring out how to take the thing that lights you up and bring it to a market that wants that thing.
Yeah. So when you said you were living in a RV, was that out of necessity or out of choice? You're trying to save up.
It was a, it was, that's complicated. It was kind of necessity. So I had basically the small story, the quick story was I had a business with Marco Romero at the time. It was called Real Elite. We did media production services for real estate investors in the San Antonio area primarily. And we made pretty good money actually for a small two-man team with very little overhead and everything. But his main business, Marco's main business, started really picking up because I was doing shows, producing shows for him on social media for free. And all of a sudden his team went from like him, his wife, and one other person to like a 13-person team. And they got
Wow.
like office spaces and like in the span of 7, 8 months, it went very quickly. So the that made him start to consider, well, the Real Elite thing is a side project for me. This is really starting to take off. I need to put all my efforts here. So we split ways amicably. He gave me the whole thing basically, but I was like, I don't want to do this without you. So I just took one or two clients. I was like, I don't know what I want to do now. And I, was trying to figure out stuff. So I actually just said, you know what, I'm going to get out of this lease that I have. I'm going to put some money into just getting this living as cheaply as possible. I thought an RV would be doing that where I could do like, uh, living cheaply and doing content creation and have like a
Hmm.
fun. So I had a show called very short lived show, RV Odyssey, because I love literature. So the Odyssey of Homer. And I was going to do a whole bunch of shows like that. And I did. And the problem was one, an RV living is much more expensive than people think.
Yeah.
Like it's really hard to do living on the street level of the RV. Like that's a lot harder than people think. I was watching videos on how to do it, and people who were doing it made it seem easy. It's not that easy. And yeah, it's like really expensive. Like just getting, if you want to hook up, you're talking like $45 a night, and over 30 days, if you were to do a hookup for 30 days, excuse me, that's basically like $1,200 or whatever. Or so it's like rent.
Rent.
And then you're paying, and then I didn't buy the RV outright. I bought an older RV, but I still had a little bit that I had to pay for it. So, it was an interesting learning experience. I like RVs. I think I would definitely one day, if I have a family and everything, it'd be fun to have an RV and go on a trip. I don't think I would live in one ever, not permanently anyway. So yeah, that was my
But
RV story. And I started off low, and then yeah,
no, and that's I kind of got that from Rich Dad Poor Dad too, is kind of having that craze for savings, like always trying to, and it's a dichotomy too. It's not a, I think it's bad to have a scarcity mindset, like scarcity versus abundance, like the
Mhm.
the save a penny versus make a buck mode or whatever people say.
Yeah,
But saving is super beneficial. And like you said, the more you save, the more you can invest in other things, the more time you can invest in yourself and your passion, just to really prioritize what's important and realize that the true cost of rent, like maybe if you get a roommate, like,
yeah,
or maybe some places, what I wanted to do when I was in Florida is I got an RV and my plan was to get a house and park the RV on property, get the hookups, and then rent out the house. I ended up not doing that.
yeah,
Uh, but just finding those little ways, house hacking is I don't know, you hear that a lot nowadays, where as soon as you can get a mortgage that you can afford reasonably, I'm very conservative, like I don't want any questions of am I able to pay this monthly rent, but with the extra space, rent it out and have the other people pitch into your mortgage. Like all these ways
Mhm.
that you can save money are huge.
Well, so I'll tell one principle that I learned many principles I learned working with Jake Nuno, the co-host with me of Jake of All Trades and a certified financial planner, was one thing, and this is just how I kind of formulated, but one thing that's problematic, especially when you're young, is really grasping the whole idea that you're going to be here for 80, 90 years. And like, because when you're young, you know that on some high abstract conceptual level, but it's very difficult to really see it because you just don't have enough history. I'm 38 now, so I remember what it was like to be 28. That was 10 years ago. And I remember what it was like to be 18 and like that whole, like you need a kind of memory and you don't have that as a 26-year-old. But one way that I really think would have been helpful for me when I was younger. And so if you're a younger person listening to this, it's like whenever someone tells me about saving, about investment, it's always about the long, like the really long term. It's always about like, so you should be in saving now because when you're 65, if you put this much in, you'll be a millionaire. It's like, well, maybe I won't even live to 65. What does that matter? What does that mean to me? Right? It doesn't really. So the way I think about it now is like, I try to have 6 to 8 months of all my expenses taken care of. So that's what you should do. Even if you're 25, your savings goal should be like if I can get to a point where I have 6 to 8 months or a year of all my expenses taken care of, that's valuable. Especially and like a more realistic would be like 3 to 6 months of your rent, and your basic living expense, like your most basic living expenses. So you could say, if you're $1,200 a month for rent, let's say, and you have a couple $100 for groceries and then gas. Let's say so 1750 a month, and save that for three. You can get a full 3 to 6 months of that. That's a savings goal you could have. That's very valuable because it gives you a kind of confidence that if things don't work out at the current job, then I can I have 3 to 6 months to figure it out and get another job or do something else, which is a good place to be in. And so to me, that's a much more manageable financial goal that I learned that's very useful that I did not have. I was often scrambling. Now, luckily, I have some sales skills, so I could often hustle something and figure something out, but it's not a great place to be in. I think now I have a good, 6+ months built up easily. Well, not easily, but I could do that pretty good. So if something bad happened, I could probably survive, even though it would suck. So
And yeah,
yeah, go ahead.
one thing I caution with that too, if I think a lot of people underestimate how much they actually spend. So
Mm.
I would highly recommend tracking your
Yes.
expenses.
Yeah.
And like I started using You Need a Budget, YNAB, like
Okay.
probably 2012. So like over 10 years. And it's been a game changer for tracking all the expenses, categorizing it. And it's a budget system of like the envelope budgeting system. So you can create these categories. So food,
Hmm.
housing, gas, and you, allocate dollars towards those. And so you know exactly like this is how much I have to spend. And then it also tracks,
Yeah.
you can see, the average of your last year's expenses to keep you honest.
Well, yeah. So I think a lot of banks do that now pretty automatically, which is nice. So I still kind of, I'll probably get rid of this soon. I have Rocket Money, which does that. It's an app that does that. But through my certified, so I also recommend people getting a CFP as soon as possible in your corner, like, especially if you're not good at finances. I don't care what it costs. Like, it's worthwhile to have that voice in your head professionally telling you what to be doing, essentially, given your situation and your long-term goals. And they will often have some kind of website or whatever that does exactly what you're talking about to get a more realistic view of, okay, this is how much I spend. And then you can make a kind of a baseline, as you said, envelope budget to know that I need 3 to 6 months of this. My point about the 3 to 6 months is the mentality, though, to
Mhm.
know that like that's a goal people can actually have that they can work toward as a young person that makes sense versus save for when you're 70. That's too big. And like you could always tell yourself, I'll do that. I'll do that later. Like I'm only 25. I'll do that in a little bit. That's not the point of saving. The point of saving should be to help you through certain intermediary things. Because it's true, you may not live to 70. So hopefully you do. Hopefully we all live to 120. I want to live to 120 healthily. But that's the wrong kind of mentality, I think, to think like the long term, which is all we're taught. That's what I was taught. And so I always tell young people, just try to get that 3 months of your baseline budget. Like go for that first.
Yeah, yeah. I think there's some value to me for the long view. Uh, as one reason when I bought my first house in Charleston, South Carolina, when I was going to power school there, I thought, okay, I have this house. The the mortgage rate is really low based on the rental market in this area. In a year when I leave, I'm pretty confident like I'm going to be able to get renters that will pay for this mortgage. And
Mhm.
as long as I can get renters to pay for this mortgage, and maybe there's some, I have a steady cash flow in another area that can play for some vacancies down the road or and I allocate. So whenever I have to change out the carpet or do any repairs, so I know there's other expenses that go with it. But in the
Mhm.
long run, in 30 years, I got a 30-year mortgage. This
Yeah.
house would be paid off. So I'd always have a place to move to, or I could an equivalent house of this stature I could sell, and I have that as a backstop. And
Hmm.
for me, that's comforting, and it's I'm not going to be rich by uh, a single house, but having that in the backdrop of a safety net is I think still valuable at minimal cost. It's really not costing me anything to have this backstop.
Yeah. Well, it costs you the house. You mean?
No, but I mean, okay, so
Oh, I see what you're
in this
saying.
case,
Okay.
uh, I I was in the military, so I had a 0% down
Got it.
house, whatever I could
Okay.
put.
Okay.
But still, primary residences you can put. This is not invest. None of this is investment advice, of course, but
Yeah.
you can put 3 to 5% down, and depending on the numbers, like if you can get to where the rents are covering the mortgage and all the costs, it is there is liability. You have risk. It's riskier than, but I can't say it's riskier than holding cash because cash is getting devalued and debased every day. So I think for me, it made a lot of sense to, as
Yeah.
soon as I could, if the numbers work out, make that jump.
Yeah, I mean, I think figuring out that situation, figuring out exactly what strategy to use is important and it's individualized. So some people may be really good, or maybe a possibility for them is, creating some side business online, for instance. And that could be an asset, something that is, valuable. I mentioned drop shipping, or I don't know if that's even as big a thing anymore, but there's a lot of little things, side hustles, like you have a passion or skill on the side, turn that into an asset. And in terms of a income generating machine, essentially, even if it's just a little bit extra, an extra $500,000 a month, that can offset a lot of stuff. And yeah, if you're in a situation where you're able and it makes financial sense to purchase a home, I think there's a lot to consider with that, including the liability part of it, including the market might change. Yeah, you should definitely consider that as one important asset or possibility, for sure. I think that's a valuable one to think about. The question is always like, what is the individual person's interests and passions? Because you do have to learn a lot. So there's still a lot
Yeah,
you, Mike, learned about that, which is good. And if you have the time to do that, do that. And you also had different, if you're not in the military, it's like if you're in Texas in the military, you don't pay property taxes, and property taxes are like one of your biggest expenses in Texas. And
that's I don't know if that's
oh no, my dad, if you're a vet, my dad's a vet, he doesn't pay any property taxes in Texas.
uh, I
100%.
I
I've
think
seen,
it's I think if you're
well,
disabled,
you're in the military.
I think if
Oh,
you have to
okay.
be
He is,
like a
okay.
certain disability.
Okay. So he's 100% disability. Okay. So
Yeah,
uh, that's probably it. Yeah. I don't know enough about the whole vet chain, but I just know my father is that.
yeah,
So yeah, good point. Point is, that's a different situation for him, even figuring out exactly what that looks like for each of you. It could just be you're living in a room in someone's house, you have a job, and you do some online business, or you go out and you flip. Like if you know Gary Vaynerchuk, you flip, like garage sale flipping, where you go to
yeah.
garage sales, you find some cheap stuff, you sell it on eBay. That you could make an extra $500 a week doing that, $200 a week. Like, that's not nothing.
Yeah, I
So
love that. I'm
yeah,
completely Gary V is one of my favorite people to
yeah, I like Gary.
follow on social
Yeah,
media. And
he's
I
great.
completely agree. Like it's got to be something you're passionate about because if you're not passionate about it, you're not going to do the research, you're not going to invest the necessary time into it. And if you do, it's a kind of a waste. If you're investing all that time and you don't like it, then what are you doing? So I think
Yeah,
that's a
yeah.
great point.
Yeah, because life is limited. Now, saying life is limited, though, one thing we can maybe move into more happiness idea is, for me, finances are not just something that's an interesting thing to make side money to have your life be better. This is what you're supposed to do. It's literally foundational to in living in the world, which is necessary for happiness, right? And making a lot of money is a valuable, good thing. especially if you do it based on your own interests, passions, and integrity and honor and everything. Like it's not obviously the idea of making a lot of money can go wrong where someone is immoral, they lie, cheat, steal, hook or crook. That's obviously bad. But the idea of making money as itself is very good. And it can, even though I don't think it directly leads to happiness necessarily, it's definitely critical for the achievement of the kinds of values that will make you happy, right? So for me, making a lot of money means being able to, find a romantic partner that we can live a wonderful life filled with art and travel and, just like experiences, going out to nice fine dining. That's could be like $200, $300 a dinner. Like those kinds of things make me happy in the sense of the achievement of values. And then building into my own business, that also makes me happy. So having the finances to do that. So to me, like, I don't know how you think about the relationship to finances and happiness. I think of it almost as like the skeleton and muscle. Finance is like the skeleton and muscles. And this is a bad analogy, but happiness is kind of the heart and soul and brain of it. And they're integral. You can't have one without the other.
I I don't know if I completely agree because I
Okay.
think I could be happy and dirt poor. Um, it definitely opens
Okay.
up. It
Really?
definitely
You think
open.
so?
Yeah, I mean,
Dirt
I
poor.
definitely,
What do you mean by
yeah,
dirt poor? Explain that. Give me your
where
number.
where I no where I could be happy in a jail cell, like locked up, not being able
Mm,
to do
you're
stuff or
you got that stoic mentality.
no, I mean I'd rather not. I'd rather not be there, but
But you can be, you're saying.
yeah, I
Okay.
think it's all how you approach things and I love Ayn Rand for the productive achievement as a value. I think I really resonate with that is where
Yeah.
I want to work the rest of my life. So why do I even need to save? Like I don't want to see how fast I can retire and just live off my retirement.
Yeah.
That's not enticing to me, but I still am going to save because
Hmm.
it provides you more options, different
Yeah.
ways to fulfill your happiness and go after things that you're excited about. So I think that's the true value of like you said, going out to fine dining. Like you got to have money. You got to have produced something in order to convince someone else to trade with you. Um,
But I want
and
to pick on this. I want to ask you about this though. This whole I can be happy in a jail cell. Like I could be happy in a concentration camp type thing. So so explain to me how you think you could be happy in that situation. Like how would that look to you?
yeah, so well, my the way I had this I thought the other day, and so I was in a submarine, and
Kind of like a jail cell, right?
yeah,
I
it's pretty
could
much a jail
never do
cell.
that, by the way. That's so brave to me.
And, no,
So like
thanks.
I think like I did a tour once. I'm like, F no. No way. That's intense
Well,
and that's very brave of you.
I was on one of the big ones, and of
Okay.
course, submarine versus jail. I know I'm working for national defense, like I have a job I'm doing every day, staying in watch. But other than that, it's wake up every day, do this. It's very like Groundhog Day esque. And I was thinking, if I'm
Mm.
in jail, I could. And nowadays, I'm assuming I have the internet and I have books. Like you could read, I could work on physical fitness and ideas. And there's so much with the internet today that you can learn and learn a language and push yourself and try to um, do things you're interested in. And I would enjoy that. Of course, it would be better to be able to interact with more people, um, have
Well,
different opportunities. Yeah.
but I think you touched on the key thing I was trying to get at is when you say like you're in this jail cell, you would have access to the internet, to books, and basically those two things, which
And
would
the
meet
floor
which
to do push-ups.
and the floor and maybe even the actual, they a lot of prisoners come out pretty ripped
Yeah.
because all they're doing is lifting weights, right? So you'd probably have access to the weights. So you'd have health, mind, and access to the world. So,
Yeah.
but the point is, I think the key thing here is that what you would have are access to some values. And what you're saying, so to me, what I'm hearing is there's a relationship between you're happy because, like, if I cut all those off, you would not be happy. If I put you in a dark cell by yourself, you probably would be then the happiness would be going away, right?
Yeah.
Or do you think you could be happy if I put you in isolation for years?
Yes, I'd rather not test that out. Probably not.
Okay. So to me, the critical thing is the pursuit of those values, the pursuit of knowledge, the pursuit of worldly getting, building something in the world through the internet, and the building of your body. That's what I'm hearing. And I agree with that fully. And the jail cell thing is, yes, without access to a nice restaurant, you could still maintain some level of happiness because you're able to pursue values on some level. I would think that you would still have a major part of your happiness impossible. There's still a limit to that in my view because you don't really have freedom. And freedom is the issue. Like you can't just walk up to the grocery store and get a pint of ice cream because you know what, to hell with it with my diet today. I just want to have some damn ice cream, right? Or whatever, or have a bottle of wine or whatever it is. You cannot do that in a jail. So there's huge limitations but you're getting to the key where to me, the pursuit of these specific values is what's critical to happiness to me, a psychological state. And if we take that away, then you have no ability to pursue any values. It's very difficult to have that. And I would tell everyone to go read a book called Man's Search for Meaning. If you haven't read that one, have you read that?
No.
I would really recommend that. That is from Viktor Frankl, and
Okay.
he basically he was in a concentration camp. Everything was taken from him, and he actually it's a beautiful story. It's very popular. Has a wonderful story about still, even in that environment, having the imagination, the vision of what he would eventually have, and that's what sustained him. And I do agree that if life comes and takes you down, that's an incredible, important value to pursue. There's a poem I recommend everybody read also called Invictus by William Ernest Henley, which is about that, which is about I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul. So in those dark moments, but I don't think the dark moments are the necessary thing for happiness. The happiness is, happiness equals sign pursuit of concrete rational values. That's how I think of it because of what I've learned from Ayn Rand.
Yeah, and I think listing out those values is a good exercise. I don't know, have you
Mm-hmm.
ever thought of like what your major
Yeah.
values are?
Oh yeah, and more lately, I did something with the CEO of ARI is Tal Svanni, and he did something called the Happiness Team, and I recommend people do the Happiness Team. It's very interesting, and has a really good and it's very valuable. He has a very good exercise system for writing these out, kind of thinking them through, going through all the concretes you can think of, trying to abstract away into what's your overall. So for me, it was like community, strength, imagination, education. Like those are top overarching values that guide a lot of my life. And it makes it a lot easier also in like building relationships because people who don't value strength and imagination, I'm not going to get along with them. Right. I'm a high level romantic in all areas of my life. And so I could not be with a woman who doesn't really appreciate romanticism, not just the romance stuff, but like high level of visionary romance. So like knowing those values are really important to know yourself so that you could go out in the world and find the kind of people that you want to be around and influence the kind of people you want to influence.
Yeah, I
How about you?
100% agree.
How about
Because
you?
my number one, I always say freedom, health, and then the loved ones and productive achievement. I think
Yeah.
go hand in hand. They're like I don't know if you necessarily need to rank order them because it's not like you have to do trade-offs, but with
Sometimes you
freedom,
do.
yeah, sometimes. I was thinking in North Korea, the people born in North Korea, that's terrible. But
Yeah.
that person
Yeah.
in North Korea can still, if they can, you know, be rational, find reason, have good ideas and fight against the corrupt regime, I think that's a life well lived. Like even in those terrible scenarios, I think you could have a great life and a happy life. So it's not that, and that's my kind of reason for bringing up the jail cell. Even
Mhm.
in these situations where people are thrust into out of their control, you can still have a rewarding, happy life. I don't know if you. agree
I
with
don't think you
that.
can have a rewarding, happy life if you're stuck in that forever. I like my view is, like I said, you can still pursue some values on some level, and that's the life you're able to. And one of the values you should be is how to get out of that. That should be a big part of your life, which can be, I guess, a form of happiness in that you're pursuing escape. And so while you're alive, you're aiming toward the life outside of that. But I do think there's a great book by Ayn Rand called We the Living. It was her first novel. I really recommend everybody read that because it was originally called Airtight, and it's about the kind of constricting, starting in the 1920s, communistic, Soviet regime that was just getting started, and how it squeezes and squeezes the best out of people. And I don't know if you've read that, but Kira Argonagov is trying to be a steel. She wants to build bridges, and she wants to pursue her life and her values. She's not able to in the world she lives in, so she wants to get out. And it's the whole journey of her trying to do that. And I think she's trapped, and there's a lot of misery. But because she has that goal of getting out as a valuable thing, she is alive, fully flourishing and alive in that sense. So I agree, as long as you have the right pursuit of values, but it's still, we cannot evade the fact that it's a huge constriction on your actual ability to do that. Like death is literally what's around the corner for people in North Korea if they step out of line.
Yeah. And I think it's huge to recognize that in the United States we have it extremely good. We are
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
best country. People I disagree with so many things that we do as a country or our country does, but it's still awesome and there's plenty of and I still am gonna fight against the things I don't like. Like that's why I love the Ayn Rand meetups and trying to spread reason and that type of philosophy, objectivism throughout the world, I think it would be a better place. I think it makes me happy to talk about it, to do this sort of stuff. And that's talking about finances. I don't like the fiat system. I think, the fact
Yeah.
that we left the gold standard and there's not free banking in the world is a mistake. And
Mhm.
uh, that's why
I
I'm not
agree.
going to say like I think everyone should learn about Bitcoin because I think that is the key value prop to Bitcoin is it everyone should learn about Bitcoin for the freedom aspect of it.
Yeah, that's a can of worms. I agree that it'd be nice if, um, I'll just say this and I'll let you have a rebuttal, but we could go on forever and we're running out of time. But I would just, my only view is you have to solve the underlying philosophical premises before you can get to that kind of freedom of money. Because the issue is, and I know you're not going to agree with this, I'm pretty confident, is that I think the government will discover ways to hinder even Bitcoin, despite, and I do know enough about it that the whole point of it is to kind of go outside the radar, and it has the whole structure of how that works. And I think it does work, but there's still a lot of power the government can have on the end product of what you could buy with that. By they could just stop, they could shut down a company if they ever find out you ever take Bitcoin, for instance. Like they just have power. So the underlying, my point is the underlying philosophy needs to be fixed. Now, if Bitcoin can somehow solve it, then I'm all for that because I'm very much for freedom and money, freedom of exchange, things like that. But again, I think as a society, we need to solve the underlying premises that are leading us to be okay with having a fiat system and a Fed and so much government interference in economics as such.
No, I agree. I don't think Bitcoin itself fixes the world because there's going to be bad ideas. We're still going to have subsidies. If we had a Bitcoin standard, people could tax the heck out of it.
Yeah,
So there needs to be good ideas, but I don't think it's like a if then type thing. I think it can be parallel, kind of like what we're seeing with
maybe.
Argentina and Javier Milei's election.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
uh, he's not gonna I don't know if that itself is going to change the world but I think it's going to introduce more people to Ayn Rand to these
yeah,
ideas that are very good and every little bit helps. And I think Bitcoin does the same thing. It's gonna get attacked, but the ideas behind Bitcoin are the Austrian economics, very free market, that kind of stuff. I think it will help the education. It goes hand in hand, and it's something that if we ever do go to a hard money standard, stay on money standard, I think it protects uh, itself from the bad ideas, from the thieves, the looters, the moochers, just the way
Mm.
Bitcoin's built compared to a gold. And that's a whole nother rabbit hole.
That's another rabbit hole. Yeah, I mean, like I said, I agree with the principles behind what they would like to do. I would love to see a marketplace for money where
Oh
it's
yeah.
like it'd be Bitcoin versus gold versus diamonds versus cigarettes. I don't know, whatever. I think that's a good thing, and I'm for that. That to me is the real thing to advocate, and to the degree that Bitcoin represents that, that's good. I I would caution people that just be careful in putting your money into it, unless you really know a lot about it and you understand what you're getting into.
Yeah.
That's my only thing. But yeah, I think, like I said, I think we're on the same page with the
Yeah, even
desire
if you
for
never
freedom.
invest in it, just the whole idea of it and Austrian economics, I think is really fascinating. And
Yeah.
it's the most I I mean, I think Alex Epstein has done a huge like tangible effect of bringing those like type of ideas into the real world. I think what
So
um
his ideas are the moral case for fossil fuels, like advocating for fossil fuels, oil, coal, natural gas, for burning more of those, using more of those, is what he's been advocating for. Okay, sorry,
yeah,
continue.
and I see that relation with Bitcoin to me. I think it can make a tangible change in the financial system with these freedom ideas, whether or not it gets adopted or it gets pushed away and taxed to forever. Just the whole idea behind sound money, I think, needs to be brought up again, and people need to realize, hey, fiat is an experiment. It's totally state run. This is not what a free market money would look like.
Well, here's the only thing I would push back for you to think about, if you agree or disagree, is just, to me, it's yes, you want sound money as an end result, but the question is, how do you get there? And to me, the way to get there is to have competition among money, because there is no sound money in terms of like, this is like Bitcoin is the thing. It may have been, maybe it's some other electronic thing, or maybe we would find that the electronic money isn't actually the best, that having some hard physical thing is necessary. I don't know. That's a question to be asked. Maybe Bitcoin can answer that. I don't know, or solve it. We could only know these types of things in a free market where there's competition. And I think for me, that's the underlying premise that needs to come out of all of this, of like, if we want sound money because of these values, we need this necessary input of freedom of competition.
Yeah, I agree. And I
Yeah, we're on the same page. Good.
Yeah, I just have come to the conclusion that Bitcoin is the best money based on my what properties of money I think are important. But
Okay.
I think you have to
That's a
come to
different
that
thing. Yeah.
yourself. Like, and
Yeah.
everyone's going to be different probably. But I
Yeah.
think Bitcoin's the best.
Okay. Okay. So last thoughts about happiness now. So there's the idea about finances. The quote that I have, I like, I think Simon Sinek is like, money won't buy you happiness, but it'll pull the yacht alongside of happiness, which I think is great. Is like, I want these fine. I'd love to have a boat one day or something, and I do actually would love to have a boat. But having a boat is not going to make me happy. What's going to make me happy is having, the friends, family, wife on the boat that I love and have great relationships with, or on the beach without a boat. Like either way, but the boat would be nice, right? It would be a nice, cool thing to have, that would, I think, enhance the in pleasure to have like a sailboat going through, the Galapagos Islands on a sailboat with your wife or something. That would be great. So that's my view of happiness and finances. Is finances are kind of allow you to be the winds of the sails of your happiness, in a sense. It like enhances it to me. What do you think? Last thoughts on happiness and finance?
Yeah, exactly. Money's not going to bring you the wife and the kids, and if it does, be skeptical because
Yeah,
that's not
exactly.
what a true relationship is. So
Yeah, yeah.
I think
Be
that's very
careful.
important, and it's hard to realize that until you come into some money. Like I uh I felt like I was making a solid paycheck as a naval officer. I had everything I could really want for the basic needs, and you realize like, hey, like okay, this is nice, but that's not what brings happiness. It's the relationships, it's the work you're doing, it's all that other
Mhm,
stuff. And
mhm.
money makes it more accessible and gives you a little more options, but it's not gonna bring the happiness.
Yeah, I think the thing that I this is something I heard from Ayn Rand when she was on, I think, Donahue, and I'm taking this to my grave. This is my favorite thing. I think you want happiness, there's two things you need, and this is definitely true for me. You need romantic love and imaginative work. You have those two pillars, you're happy. And everything else is supported under those pillars in a sense. But I think those two things, romantic love and imaginative work. So that actually makes money and all that goes along with that. But yeah, I like that.
Very nice.
All right, Mike. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me and talking about finances, happiness. And we only had a slight argument about Bitcoin. That was pretty civil, and I appreciate that. But thanks so much, and I hope to see you. And if you're in Austin, guys, hopefully Mike will come join us for Third Thursdays and future events, and you can go see him there and go check out his podcast. Again, I'll share a link in the show notes, but it's linktr.ee/ the Mike White pod. So check that
Yeah.
out.
Thanks so much, Kirk. I look forward to seeing you at the third Thursday this month.
All right, see you later.